I apologize. Everything is oil. People just don't know it. We have more oil than everybody. What?
Peculiar. The US is sending away nearly a third of its oil just to get it swapped out with oil from somewhere else. This is the story of America's wild oil revolution and why it still won't give the US energy independence. This video is brought to you by Read, Write, Own, but more on that a little later. To understand America's relationship with oil, let's start with a quick crash course. So for most of the last 150 years, the US has been the place to get oil. We drilled almost all of it, and we also use the most oil in the world. But in the late 1930s, other countries, namely Saudi Arabia and a few other Middle Eastern countries, realized they also have tons of oil. So they started drilling like crazy. Around this time, the US starts importing a little bit of oil, but it still drills most of it itself. But America's ravenous demand for oil to fuel its planes, trains, and automobiles can't be contained. America's demand for oil starts significantly outpacing US production. So bring in the imports. Pretty quickly, the US becomes increasingly reliant on foreign oil. But then in 1973, after the US gave money to Israel, Saudi Arabia's enemy in the Yom Kippur War, they and other Arabian oil exporters were like, actually no more oil for you, and imports slide.
The Mideast oil embargo.
The US doesn't have enough oil to make up for this loss, so there's just no oil for consumers.
Gasoline stations ran dry.
Empty gas pumps, no more road trips.
To be sure that there is enough oil to go around for the entire winter all over the country, it will be essential for all of us to live and work in lower temperatures.
The problem was so bad that President Nixon literally told businesses to stop working if it would save energy.
I am directing that the daytime temperatures in federal offices be reduced immediately to a level of between 65 and 68 degrees. And that means in this room too.
And with this, the US really starts talking about this thing called energy independence, and the US's crippling lack of it. To respond, Nixon bans oil exports from the US and makes a plan to build 1,000 nuclear power plants by the year 2000. According to one estimate, if all of these nuclear power plants were actually built, the US would be able to meet twice its energy demands in 2022, with no fossil fuel emissions from the production. But instead, there's 54. Anyway, in the meantime, the US needs more oil because those gas engines aren't going to run themselves. But that's a little awkward because the US still can't find that oil in its own soil. We start importing more oil from Canada, our pretty peaceful neighbor, but our oil habit still requires we bring in a bunch from the Middle East. It's in this context, slowly getting more oil from Canada, using a lot from OPEC countries, and not getting much here, that perfectly sets up a revolution. So as you can see, the line that I'm on right now is going down. And a similar thing is happening with natural gas, the other big fuel source we use in America, that's collected largely the same way as oil. You'd think that it's going down because we're out of oil, but that's actually not true at all. The US had and still has tons of oil. The problem was we couldn't.
I didn't know about the whole Nixon power plant oil crisis thing. I don't think I'm familiar with that period. We're about to get a shitload from Israel.
Get it. This is the Barnett Shale. It's a giant natural gas reserve around Fort Worth, Texas, and in 1995, the US government said it had just a bunch of natural gas in it. But it was unconventional. See, there are two ways that things we want tend to exist underground: conventionally or unconventionally.
The conventional oil wells were just, think about a big oil puddle underneath the ground. You're just tapping it like a straw and sucking it out. We still have plenty of wells like that, like Saudi Arabia, the Middle East. They basically have that kind of oil in plentiful, right? That's why it's super cheap.
But this Barnett Shale is not like that. It's made up of these big rocks called shale that have natural gas and some oil trapped inside of them. But the question is how to get in. People have kind of known the answer for a long time was fracturing the rock, or fracking. Even John Wilkes Booth, a month before he killed Abe Lincoln, was a fracker. But the problem with early fracking was it didn't always work super well. Like for John Wilkes Booth. He put some explosives into a well and made a huge hole, but there wasn't a drop of oil left. So naturally, he left Pennsylvania and killed the president, I guess. See, this is the type of anger not getting oil can give to people, especially when they...
I can give you a rundown on the oil crisis sometime, studied it in college. Interesting. I just need like one good article. I'll blow through an article. What was that? Did you guys see that? Did you guys see that screen? That thing my screen just did? I wonder if it's because I'm messing with the GPU. I guess not. Maybe it's just a monitor. Huh. Either way. Fucking. So we just have we got the rock oil. We don't have the gooey drinkable stuff. We have the munchy snack oil. And don't try to harvest it, because then you might have to kill the president. Interesting.
Spend tons of money on it. So in the late 1990s, when this guy named George Mitchell was looking at his document that said, all of your land on the Barnett Shale has tons of gas stuck in it, but you can't get it, he might have had murder on his mind. He was hemorrhaging cash trying to get fracking to work when his team switched things up a little bit. They used a newer technique of cracking open the rocks by shooting in a special water-based mixture and drilled sideways instead of just straight down. With the perfect tweaks, production gushed. A revolution. This finally made it fast and cheap enough to drill all of the lush resources trapped in America's shale. For a few years, producers were still skeptical. But then in 2008, oil prices hit all-time highs. Interest rates hit all-time lows, and from 2008 to 2018, the US doubles its oil production. And in 2015, they lift the ban on exporting US oil, which explains this graph. This increase isn't 100% because of fracking, but it's mostly fracking. So this explains how we got to where we are, where the US has a surprisingly high amount of oil because of this new technological innovation. But there's still something weird going on. The US produces pretty close to the amount of oil that Americans use. And yet, we send a huge portion of it out of the country just to get different oil from other countries and bring it back to America. There's some strange logistics that explain why this international oil swap is happening.
Wait, what?
So the one remaining part that we still haven't really talked about between oil being in the ground and actually getting used is refining. For any oil from anywhere to actually be used, it first has to be refined. Otherwise, it's just this thick, black, toxic sludge that really can't be used for anything. So the refinery I'm going to right now will help explain why American oil isn't always the best answer.
This is Chevron's El Segundo oil refinery, which is one of the biggest oil refineries on the West Coast. And most of the oil it's cooking
isn't American.
Instead, it's coming from one of these ships, which sit a couple miles offshore and quietly get their oil sucked out through these big pipes.
In October of last year, the most recent data we have, this refinery got crude oil from South Korea, Argentina, Guyana, Mexico, and Colombia. And it's not just this refinery.
Another Chevron in California imported crude oil from Iraq, Venezuela to Mississippi, Canada to Michigan, and even Texas, the state that drills almost half of the US's crude oil, imported 26 million barrels of crude just last October. Quick interlude, this honestly probably won't help you that much, but a barrel of oil is 42 gallons, so kind of similar to a bathtub.
So this seems like a lot of work to just move all this oil around when we have it right here, but we just don't use it. So why don't we use our own oil?
Well, there's a few reasons we don't. So first of all, a lot of American oil does stay in America. Like Texas drills a ton of oil and then refines it down the street. Then Texans can pump it into their pickup truck at a gas station. When it's all really close like this, almost all transportation costs are gone, which is why Texas has some of the lowest gas prices in the union. But the first problem is that not all the oil is next to a refinery, and the refineries aren't always next to the people who need it.
We'll use Los Angeles as an example. In 2021, California used 605 million barrels of oil. The state happens to be one of the largest producers in the country, so part of that oil comes from inside the state.
Like a few miles from this refinery is an oil field in the middle of LA, and there are some other famously hidden oil wells that are scattered throughout the city and next to people's houses.
But all of the oil drilled in California still only accounts for a fifth of what it needs. So how about we just bring in some extra from Texas?
For most of the country, there's a system of oil pipelines that take oil from the places where lots of oil is being produced to the people who want it. But California is an exception. The state and its almost 40 million residents have no crude oil pipelines coming in, and they probably never will. That's because even if the oil from Texas came to California, most refineries in the state wouldn't be able to use it. This is the biggest reason the US can't use its own oil. It's just not the right type. Let me explain. For simplicity's sake, I got this from the Explain Like I'm 5 subreddit. Let's imagine there are two types of oil in the world. One is strawberry, and the other is chocolate.
Wait, there's an Explain Like I'm 5 subreddit? That's awesome. I feel like Sus would like that one, actually. That's not a joke. I feel like she would love that. I'm gonna start building karma on it.
For a long time, the US produced a bunch of chocolate oil. So to use it, we also created a bunch of refineries that turned chocolate into gold. Not actually gold, but you know what I mean. But then over time, especially with the use of fracking, the US oil supply became a lot more strawberry. And those chocolate refineries can't use that. If they do, they'll have some really big problems. Oil refiners could create more refineries if they wanted, but according to one commentator, the US government's environmental standards and push to abandon fossil fuels makes it a risky investment. This might be why the last significant oil refinery built in the US was made almost 50 years ago. So instead of going through the super expensive process of updating America's refineries to use strawberry oil, refiners decided it would be a better idea to just import chocolate oil from other countries who still make it and use that in our chocolate refineries. Then just send all that strawberry oil overseas where they have refineries for it. So this is why in 2022, 59% of oil going to California refineries came from foreign countries, and 80% of El Segundo's oil originates abroad. And despite exporting more, the US still imports pretty hefty sums of oil. The real picture is more complicated than this. Like, there's a whole range of differences in oil types, and refiners don't just use one super specific type, but the end result is the same. The companies who buy and sell oil decided that keeping the same refineries in America and just importing the right type of oil just makes them more money than using oil from the States. And that leads us to the final concern a lot of people have about American oil.
Energy independence.
Energy independence.
The concept of energy independence is this really nice idea. It gives these vibes of,
yeah, so it's just like a hot swap. You give us that shit, we'll give you some of this shit. We got that good, but like we kind of have like a structure built on garbage. You could just say the difference instead of saying strawberry and chocolate. It's not that complicated. Explain like I'm 5. He's explaining like you're 5. Literally got it off the subreddit, and he just said it's kind of complex. Yeah, he just said it's more complicated than that, but that's just to like give you an understanding, you know. That's just to kind of give you like a breakdown of what, you know, like an analogy, you know, for the simpler mind to understand, for the unstudied mind to get like easy comprehension without having to know anything. Did you see that? Did you see that? That flash to a black screen. Yes. I want to... Hold on. Am I, like, riding the memory clock too hard or something? Okay. Okay. Dude, why is Afterburner keep... Okay, I relocked that. Good. Apply. Yeah, you want to know why? Because it keeps letting my fucking... Keeps letting my voltage go to plus 80%. I think that's why. I think I don't. I think I undo this and I don't have that problem anymore, I think. Kind of thought that was you. I thought it was something I did the first like 1 or 2 times it did it. You can say idiots, it's not a dirty word. You can simplify the difference, or even saying there's 2 types. You don't need a flavor analogy for that. Some people do. Listen. Hold the fuck up. Hold the fuck up. Isn't it just easier to use that? And doesn't that mean more people, including like small fucking children, can literally just understand a complex, an analogy for like a complex system? Like that, it works. It works. Now we all know what it means. Like, you can be as smart as you want, but the more easily it is for you to explain a complex thing to someone who doesn't know anything about it means you know more about that thing. Your mic thing triggered again? Hold on, let me try something. Split second. Your audio is getting real fucky. Was it getting fucky when I messed with stuff? Lasted around 5 seconds for me. Like, just happened. Because I just adjusted the USB. It might be better now. It wasn't plugged in all the way. That might be better now. The fucking USB ports on my case are like the tightest USB ports ever. You gotta like... You know what I mean? Your voice doesn't change, just adds additional artifacts. Yeah, no, I understand the noise that it's doing. We were talking about that earlier. You know, $15 microphone, gang.
Ultimate control over one's destiny. No other country can decide whether we have power. And it seems like it's just like the logical answer. If we make it ourselves, it can be closer and cheaper, maybe? But the reality is that in a lot of cases, it's just not.
It would be very, very disruptive to the economy for the U.S. to say all of a sudden, we're not importing or we're not exporting. We're just going to we're just going to work with what we have. The Chicago refineries would find they have no oil to refine. It would take decades to sort that out. It would be a mess.
The biggest factor in gas prices is nothing more than the international cost of oil, which the U.S. only has a small part in determining. And then beyond price, just because oil is close doesn't mean we can use it.
You'll hear, Joe Biden screwed up and that's why we don't have energy independence. But we never have had energy independence. And every country should worry about energy security. That they have enough energy to meet the needs and demands of the economy, of the people, of the consumers. The U.S. has energy security.
Focusing on energy security instead of independence is why I've been slowly riding up this Canadian line for so long. Historically speaking, it's a lot less likely that the US gets in a fight with Canada than it will a country in the Middle East. So it's a pretty safe bet their oil will be there for us. And as for our oil addiction, as much as...
So we got that Canadian plug. you know, we're like, nah, bro, we got that Canadian plug on lock. Y'all can't have it. That's ours, bro. We're cool with the Canadians. You know what I mean? They got that good oil. We cop that shit from them. Ride the Canadian line. Jordy will be riding some Canadian lines later tonight. No, so that's cool to know though that like okay, so it's based on more meetings. Have fun, y'all. Yeah, you have fun as well. So the fact that like there's the different oil types, right? And like we have a structure built on an older oil type that we don't actually harvest anymore. We could harvest it that way, but it would be inefficient. However, it is more efficient to harvest it differently because it's more, well, it's less efficient for the country, more efficient for the companies involved to harvest better and at a faster rate for less money and then just sell that stuff. See, this is one of those issues with like privatization. Or did we run out? Did we run out of the old type of oil? Or has our privatized harvesting practices caused it to just not be worth it? I don't think that was covered. I don't think that was covered here. And I kind of feel like I need to know.